Envelope had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. I don't know why I waited. Maybe I already knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, that whatever was inside it would change things. Not fix them, just change them. There's a difference, and I've had enough years to know which one actually feels like which. The return address was from a law firm in Portland, Harewick and Associates. I didn't recognize the name. I'm 63 years old, and I've dealt with exactly 2 lawyers in my life. The one who handled my mother's estate when she passed, and the one who sat across from me 22 years ago and explained the terms of my daughter's adoption papers. I remember both of those men clearly. Neither one was named Harewick. I made coffee first, sat down at the table, then I opened it. "Dear Mr. Callahan," it began. "You are named as a beneficiary in the estate of Ms. Lorraine Voss Callahan. The firm requests your presence at a reading of the will, scheduled for the 14th of this month. Given the nature of the bequest, we strongly encourage your attendance. Lorraine." I sat there with the letter in my hand and the coffee going cold beside me, and I just sat there. Lorraine had been my wife for 9 years. She'd been my ex-wife for 22. The math of that still gets me sometimes, the way the second number keeps growing while the first one stays fixed. We were married longer ago than most of my neighbors' children have been alive, and I hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. Not since the last phone call, the one she made from a hospital in Seattle when our daughter, had her first child. Lorraine had called to tell me. That was the kind of woman she was even then. Even after everything, I didn't go to the hospital. I told myself it was because my daughter hadn't invited me. That part was true, but there's more than one reason a man can have for a thing, and the other reason, the one I didn't say out loud, was that I was ashamed. I'd been ashamed for a long time by then, and shame is a strange kind of prison. You build it yourself and you hold the key, and you still can't figure out how to get out. The reading was in 11 days. I put the letter back in the envelope. Then I took it out and read it again. Then I put it in the kitchen drawer with the takeout menus and the spare batteries and the birthday cards I'd never sent. I didn't sleep much that night. My daughter's name is Sylvie. She was 7 years old the last time things were good between us, and she was 29 when I walked into that law office and saw her sitting across the room with her husband beside her and her arms crossed the way her mother used to cross hers when she was preparing for a fight. She looked at me the way you look at something you've decided not to feel anything about anymore. Not hatred, something colder than that. She looked at me the way you look at a water stain on the ceiling. You see it, you note it. You've made your peace with it being there. Her husband. I'll call him what I've always called him in my head, which is nothing, because he's never been anything to me but the man my daughter chose, leaned over and said something to her when I walked in. She didn't respond. She just looked at the folder on the table in front of her. There were 4 other people in the room. 2 of them I didn't recognize. One was a woman about Lorraine's age, someone from her foundation probably. The 4th was a young associate from the firm who kept refilling the water glasses like it gave him something to do with his hands. I took a seat on the same side as the door. The attorney, Mr. Harewick himself, older than I pictured, with the careful voice of a man who delivered a lot of difficult news in his life, came in at 5 after 2 and set his briefcase on the table without apology for the wait. Before he could open it, my daughter's husband looked directly at me. "I want you to know," he said, not quietly, "that Sylvie has no expectation of you being involved in whatever this is. We're here because the firm said she had to be. That's it." I looked at him. I've had a lifetime of learning when to speak and when to let a thing hang in the air. I let it hang. Sylvie still hadn't looked up from the table. "I appreciate everyone making the time," Mr. Harewick said, in the tone of someone who has learned to speak over awkward silences like their furniture. He opened his briefcase. Miss Callahan was very specific about the order of proceedings today. There was a letter she asked me to read aloud before we addressed the formal terms of the estate. She was insistent about that. He pulled out several sheets of paper and smoothed them on the table. Sylvie looked up then, just barely. Her jaw shifted. "This letter," Mr. Harewick said, is addressed to both of you." He cleared his throat and began to read. "If you're hearing this, then I've finally run out of time to say it myself. I've written this letter 4 times in the last 6 years and thrown away every version. This one I'm leaving with Arthur because if I leave it anywhere else, I'll throw it away again, and some things need to stop being thrown away. Sylvie, baby. There's something I should have told you before you turned 18. I've carried the guilt of not telling you for most of your adult life, and I need you to know that the reason I didn't, the reason I kept choosing silence, was not because I was protecting you. I was protecting myself. I want you to know that I know that. When you were 14, your father lost his job. You know that part. What you don't know is why. I hadn't known she was going to say this." My hands went flat on the table. "Your father was the senior project manager at Kellner and Price. He had been there for 11 years. In the spring of that year, there was an audit. Funds had been moved. Not a lot, by the standards of what the firm handled, about $40,000, but enough to flag and enough that someone had to be responsible for it. The person responsible was me." I heard Sylvie make a sound, just a small one. "I was managing the household accounts, and your father had given me signatory authority on 2 of the firm's client accounts as well, because we were having trouble covering the mortgage that year, and he trusted me, and I made a very bad decision. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would pay it back. I told myself a lot of things that year that were not true. When the audit started, I panicked. Your father found out what I'd done before the auditors did. He came home and we sat at the kitchen table. The green one, Sylvie, the one you used to do your homework on. And he told me that if I came forward, I would face criminal charges. My license would be gone. Everything I'd built with the foundation would be gone. And he said, and I have to say this exactly the way he said it, because it has lived in my head every single day since, he said, 'You've spent 20 years building something for people who need it. I'm not going to let one terrible mistake erase that.' He took the blame. He told the auditors that he had misallocated the funds. He had a lawyer, a good one, and the firm chose not to press criminal charges, partly because of your father's long record there, and partly because the managing partner owed your father a favor that I didn't know about at the time. But they let him go. And the story in that industry travels fast. He couldn't find work in his field again. Not at that level. You know what the years after that looked like. You lived them. And you blamed him. I let you. I told myself it was complicated. I told myself that the foundation employed 400 people and served communities that had nothing else. I told myself that the work was bigger than any one family. And all of that was true. And none of it was the real reason I stayed quiet. The real reason was that I was a coward, and I was afraid of losing you. I lost you both anyway. I just lost you one at a time. The room was very quiet. The young associate had stopped refilling the water glasses. The woman from the foundation had her head bowed. Sylvie's husband had his hand on the table near her hand, but he wasn't touching her. Sylvie was looking at me, not the way she had when I walked in, differently. Like she was trying to place something, like a word she knew but couldn't find. Mr. Harwick kept reading. Your father never asked me to tell you. Not once. I used to think that was because he'd made peace with it, and maybe he had. I think now it was because he loved you more than he needed to be right. That sounds like something off a greeting card, and I'm sorry for that, but it happens to be accurate. Sylvie, your father did not steal from anyone. He did not fail you. He made a choice to absorb a consequence that wasn't his, and the only thing he asked in return, the only thing I ever heard him ask, was that I not let it ruin the foundation, which it didn't, which you know. I've tried to live with that deal honestly. I'm not sure I have. There was a specific bequest in the estate for your father. The details are in the formal documents. I want you to hear the letter first, because I need you to understand that I am not giving your father anything he didn't already earn. I owe him a debt I cannot repay. This is what I have. I am sorry, Sylvie. I am sorry that I let you grow up believing a version of your father that was my fault to correct and never mine to leave in place. Whatever you choose to do with this, however you choose to feel, I understand. I just needed you to know. Your father is a good man, He has always been a good man. That is the truest thing I know. Mom? Mr. Harwick set the papers down. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Sylvie's husband said, "This doesn't." And Sylvie said, "Stop," very quietly, and he stopped. She was still looking at me. Her eyes were wet. Her jaw was still set the way her mother's used to get, that particular angle that meant she was holding something in with everything she had. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. Her voice was even. That was the thing I wasn't prepared for. Not shouting, not crying, just even, flat, the voice of someone who has just had the ground reassembled underneath them and doesn't know yet whether to stand on it or not. "I didn't want you to see your mother that way," I said. "That's not a good enough reason." "I know. You let me for 20 years. She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I said things to you." "I know. At the funeral, I said, Sylvie, I told you that you had no right to be there, at her funeral. I hadn't known she was going to bring that up in front of other people. But I understood it. She needed to say it somewhere it would land with its full weight." "Yes," I said. "And you just stood there. You left." "Yes." She looked at the table. Her husband had stopped trying to touch her. He was reading something in her posture that I couldn't read, some private signal of hers that he'd had years to learn. "I'm not ready to." She stopped again. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this today." "You don't have to do anything with it today," I said. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "That's very calm of you." "I've had a long time to be calm about it." She looked at me again. And for just a second, just a sliver of a second, she looked like the 7-year-old who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during long car trips. Not the 37-year-old woman with the set jaw and the careful distance. Just her, the person she'd been before, everything. Then she looked back at the table. Mr. Harwick very quietly began explaining the terms of the estate. Lorraine left me $460,000 in the lake house in Oregon. I hadn't known about the lake house. She'd bought it 6 years ago, apparently, and she put it in a trust that transferred to me upon her death. It's a 2-bedroom place on the water. I've seen pictures now. There are pine trees, a dock, a kayak in the garage that I will probably never use. The money I understood. The lake house I didn't, not at first. But I've been up there twice since the reading, and I think I understand it now. Lorraine always said I needed somewhere to think that wasn't also somewhere I lived. She said I was the kind of man who turned his house into a pressure cooker without realizing it. She was right about that. She was right about a lot of things. I'm 63 years old and I am sitting at a dock watching the sun come down behind the tree line, and I am thinking about how strange it is that the hardest thing in my life was something I chose, and I'd choose it again. I didn't save Lorraine's career to be repaid. I want to be clear about that. I did it because I could see what her work meant to people, and I could see what the alternative would do to her, and I made a decision in about 40 minutes at a green kitchen table while our daughter slept upstairs. It was not a complicated decision in the moment. The complicated part came after, the way complicated things always do, not in the choosing, but in the living with. The years that followed were hard. I won't dress that up. I did bookkeeping for a plumbing company for 7 years. I drove for a courier service for a while after that. I rented a room from a man named Earl who charged me $400 a month and replaced the furnace the one time I asked. That was my life. And I chose it, and it was still my life, and there were days I was angry about it in ways I still don't entirely have language for. But I never told Sylvie. Because telling Sylvie would have meant destroying her image of her mother. And whatever had gone wrong between Lorraine and me, she was still Sylvie's mother. Some things you protect not because the other person deserves the protection, but because your child deserves a parent she can love without condition. My daughter called me 2 weeks after the reading. I was at the lake house. I didn't recognize the number. She had a new phone. And my hand went tight around it the same way it did when I got the letter. There's a particular kind of not breathing you do when you're 63 and you don't know if the voice on the other end of a phone is going to be something you've waited 20 years for. "It's me," she said. "I know," I said. I did know. I'd known her voice since the moment it existed. There was a long silence. Not uncomfortable exactly. The kind of silence where two people are standing at the edge of something large and neither one has decided how to step onto it yet. "I don't want you to think this is." She stopped, tried again. "I don't have this figured out." "That's okay. It's not going to be. I can't just make it normal overnight." "I know. But I wanted you to." Another pause. I could hear her doing something in the background, the way she used to fidget with things when she was thinking. Her keys, maybe. "My daughter's birthday is in March." "My granddaughter. I've seen her in photographs. She's 4 years old and she has Lorraine's forehead, and what looks like my mother's nose, though I may be imagining that last part." "Okay," I said. "I thought maybe—" She stopped. "I don't know. I'm still angry. I want you to know that. I'm still angry that you didn't tell me." "That's fair. But I'm also angry at myself for a lot of things I said, and I'm angry at Mom. And I don't really know what to do with all of that at the same time. You don't have to sort it out all at once." She made that sound again, the one that was almost a laugh. "You keep saying that. It keeps being true." A long pause. Outside, a heron was standing in the shallows near the dock. It had been there for 20 minutes. I'd been watching it the whole time. "She really never told you she was going to do this?" Sylvie asked. "The letter? The house?" "No." "You didn't know?" I opened a letter I'd been avoiding for 3 days and sat down in a law office. "That's what I knew." "God," she said softly. "Then that sounds like her." It did. Lorraine always did things at the exact last possible moment, in a way that somehow still managed to be on time. I'd loved that about her once. Hated it later. Missed it more than I expected. "March," I said. "What day in March?" I heard her exhale. "The 14th. "I'll be there," I said. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Okay," in a voice that was small and careful and trying hard not to be hopeful, which is its own kind of hopeful. "Okay," I said. We stayed on the phone for a few more minutes without saying much. The heron didn't move. The sun finished going down. At some point, Sylvie said she had to get her daughter to bed, and I said goodnight, and she said goodnight, and the call ended. I sat on the dock for a long time after that. I don't know what March will look like. I stopped trying to script things that haven't happened yet. That's something else the last 20 years taught me. You can spend a lot of energy rehearsing conversations that never go the way you planned, and meanwhile the real moments arrive sideways, in the middle of a week when you weren't prepared, on a phone call you almost didn't answer. What I know is this. I have a granddaughter I've only seen in photographs. I have a lake house with pine trees and a kayak I'll probably never use. I have a daughter who is angry and trying, and somewhere underneath, all of that, still mine. And I have a green kitchen table that doesn't exist anymore, and 40 minutes on a night 22 years ago when I made the only decision that felt like the right one. I used to wonder if I would make the same choice knowing what came after. I've stopped wondering. The answer doesn't change anything. The choice was made by a man who loved his wife and his daughter and believed in something. And I'm still that man, just older. The years in between didn't take that from me. Lorraine knew that. That's why she wrote the letter. I think about her often. There's a green kitchen table that doesn't exist anymore, and I still think about it more than I think about most things that do. I made a decision at that table in about 40 minutes. No one asked me to, no one would have blamed me if I hadn't, and for 22 years the person I loved most in the world looked at me like I was someone who had failed her, because I never corrected the story, and the story was wrong. That's the part people don't talk about when they talk about doing the right thing. They talk about the moment of choice like it's the hard part. It isn't. The hard part is the Tuesday 10 years later, when your daughter won't return a phone call, and you're sitting in a rented room, and you know exactly why, and you could fix it with a single conversation, and you don't. Not because you're weak, because you decided that her having a mother she can love without reservation is worth more than your own name being cleared. That's not a dramatic decision. It's just a quiet one you make over and over again, every day without applause. I've had a lot of time to think about what held me together through those years. It wasn't stubbornness, though I have plenty of that. It was something closer to a sense of what I owed. Not to Lorraine, not even to Sylvie, but to my own understanding of who I was. I knew what I'd done and why I'd done it. I knew it was right. And I made a decision early on that I was not going to let the gap between what people believed and what was true eat me from the inside out. That kind of integrity, knowing your own account is accurate even when no one else's matches it, that's not something anyone can give you. You either build it or you don't. The intelligence part, and I say this as a man who drove a courier van for 6 years, isn't about what school you went to or how much money you make. It's about being honest with yourself about cause and effect. I knew that if I told Sylvie the truth to protect my own reputation, I would be making a choice for reasons that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with me. That's a distinction worth thinking clearly about. Most of the damage people do to each other comes from not making that distinction. And the endurance. The part where you just keep going when the going is genuinely bad. I think that comes from having a reason that's bigger than your own comfort. My reason was Sylvie. It was always Sylvie. You can survive an awful lot of hard years if you know why you're surviving them. Lorraine left me a lake house and a letter she should have sent 20 years ago. What she actually left me was the moment I watched my daughter's face change in a law office when the truth finally reached her. I don't know what March will look like. I don't know how much of what broke can be put back together or in what shape, but my granddaughter turns 4 in the spring and I'm going to be there. That's enough to build from.